Hi, today's lesson is going to be about writing and expanding multiplication expressions. Before we get started with that, I would like to talk about some vocabulary terms that would be important to know as we talk about them and reference them in today's lesson. Some of them are a review from last year, and if you can't quite remember what they are and put them in your own words immediately, I would write them down so that you don't forget. If you remember them and it comes to you right away, it's up to you if you want to write them. The new ones I definitely want you to put in. The first review word is factor. And remember, a factor is a number that you can multiply times another number to get a product. So a factor is one of those numbers that are multiplied together. The answer to a multiplication problem is a product. That's your second vocabulary word, product. The answer to a multiplication problem. That's a review. If you remember it, great. You don't need to put it in your ISN. If you think later on you might forget, please put it in there. And the last one that we have for today is quotient. And a quotient is the answer to a division problem. That's another review. That's the last review one for today. Quotient, the answer to a division problem. All right, we have two new vocabulary words for you. The first one is term, and I kind of want to give you an example here on my little scratch paper that I have. And let's see, I'm going to show you an example of an expression, 7g plus 8h plus 3. The terms in this expression are any of the numbers or any of the parts that can be added or subtracted from the rest of the expression. So these are all terms. 7g is a term. I could take it away from the expression and still have an expression. I'd take away the sign too. I could take away the 8h and still have an expression. I could take away the 3 and still have an expression. So a term is anything that can be added to or subtracted from the rest of the terms, or the rest of the expression. That one is definitely going in your ISN. Excuse me. The last one is coefficient. It's another new one that I would like for you to have in your ISN, please. And a coefficient is the number that's a constant factor in a variable term. So the terms with variables in this example, if you want to rewrite the example, great, you can do that. The terms with variables are 7g and 8h. This one does not have a variable, so it cannot have a coefficient. The coefficient is 7 and 8 because they go with the variable. So the number that goes with the variable is the coefficient. It's a constant factor. So there are 7 g's, there are 8 h's. Again, this one does not have a coefficient because it does not have a variable. Okay, now that we have those vocabulary terms, we're going to try to remember to use them as we talk about our examples in our lesson as we go along. Okay, let's find our first example. And we have a lot of different examples that we're going to do, and we're just going to kind of work through them together so that we are ready to work through our problems in class tomorrow. They shouldn't be too difficult, but just combining like terms is very important. So let's take a look at example 1, and it says, write each expression in the fewest number of symbols and characters. Use math terms to describe the expressions and parts of the expression. So we're going to use those math terms, the factors and the products and the coefficient and the term and all of those. So as we go, we're going to talk about those so they become part of our vocabulary. Okay, let's look first at A. Problem A, write each expression using the fewest number of symbols and characters. Okay, this is where we go back to a couple lessons ago. I did a shortcut for my multiplication because I don't like the X. This multiplication sign looks a lot like a variable. So I don't like to use the X when we're working with variables. So even in math, a lot of times we're going to switch it and we can use several different ways. I'm going to show you down here. Let's say we had 3 times 4. There are several ways to write this. We could use that dot that I used before, and you'll see that in a couple of our other examples here. You could do 3 times 4 in parentheses, And when we come to variables, another way that you can do it, let's say this, we'll change this 4 here to an x. We could do 3 and x and just squish them right next to each other. And that means 3 times x. You cannot do that with just numbers. If I did 3 and 4 and I squished them right next to each other, I don't know that it says 3 times 4. To me, it says 34. So you may not do that with just numbers, but when there's a variable involved, you can squish it right next to the number, and that's our fewest number of symbols. We don't have to have anything between the variable and the number. Okay, for that to be the case, and we want the fewest number of symbols, let's do that. We're going to have 6 times a variable, so we're going to put them right next to each other. And I know some of you make your B's and your 6's to look a lot alike. Try really hard to make sure it looks like a B and not a 6. We don't want 66. Okay, fewest number of symbols. Now, we have 2 numbers here, so let's combine those 2 numbers. We can do 4 times 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So fewest number of symbols, we're going to do 12 times h. Now remember, when we have a variable and a number, we can just put the variable beside it. So the quickest way to say 4 times 3 times h is 12h. Okay, let's do the same thing over here. 2 times 2 times 2 times a times b. Whew, that's a mouthful. Okay, let's combine the numbers together because we can do that. Remember, multiplication property tells me, the commutative property tells me I can put them in any order, so let's put them together. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8, so this is going to be 8. All the numbers work together to make 8. Now, remember, we're multiplying times a variable. We have 2 variables here, so we can squish them with our number. And when we have more than one variable, the variables always need to be in alphabetical order. Okay, they might not be presented to you that way, but they need to show up that way in your simplified version. So first comes A, and we're going to squish it right next to the 8. And the B, we can squish them right in there too, because A, B together doesn't look like a different number, like this 34 back here, but A and B are 2 different numbers, squished together, we multiply them. Okay, let's go. We have a couple more examples here. 5 times m times 3 times p. A commutative property of multiplication, remember, tells me that we can do any order we want to do. We can switch the orders around. So let's do that, and let's put the numbers with the numbers and the letters with the letters. So I'm going to just rewrite it here. 5 times 3 times m times p. I just kind of flip-flopped my m and my 3. Okay, now let's combine our numbers, 5 and 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. And then we have to put them in alphabetical order. We can put our variables just like we did here, but in alphabetical order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, I think M comes first, and then P. If you're not sure, sing your ABCs. I've had to do that for a long time. So the simpler way to say 5 times M times 3 times P is 15MP. All right, one more example here or one more problem for example 1. This is 1 times G times W. Now, we can just put down the number. The first variable alphabetically would be G and W. Remember when we squish them together? That means we're multiplying them. Now, that, let's see, the identity property of multiplication said any number times 1 is itself. Well, let's say G times W is a number, because it will be a number, times 1 is going to be GW. So we can leave off the 1, and the correct way to write it would be to leave off the 1. So we're going to write it as GW. Because when you take GW, let's say it's 3 times 4, which is 12. 12 times 1 is still 12. Whatever numbers you put in there, whatever number that becomes, times 1 is still going to be just that. So we'll leave off the 1 because it's the proper way to do it. Okay, let's move on to example 2. Whew. We have combined them. We have shortened them. Okay, now we're going to expand them and make them bigger. This is to expand multiplication expressions. We will rewrite the expressions, including the multiplication sign with a dot, back into the expression. So we're just going to expand them out. Okay, 5G looks kind of like our 6B up here. We're going to expand it back out to this, but we're not going to use the X. So we have 5 times G. It's that simple. Okay, let's do the same thing here. 7 times A times B times C. We're just expanding them back out. This is going to help us with our next example. All right, 12G. That can be 12 times G. Or, like it was here, if we broke it down and found some factors, oh, I forgot to use my vocabulary here. If we found some factors for this coefficient, we could do 6 times 2 times G, but then 6 could have different numbers. We could do 4 times 3 times G. We could do, 6 was 2 times 3, so we could do 2 times 3 times 2 times G. Oh my, that could get a little crazy. I'm just going to go back to this one because that's what I know. This is kind of a simpler one, so we could do that. You could do the 6 and the 2 if you want. Okay, let's do this one. Ooh, we got to make this one even farther, even more expanded. Okay, let's expand this coefficient and variable here. For this term, we'll expand this term. Its coefficient is 3 times h times 8. Okay. And to make it simpler later on, I might put the numbers together. So I might do 3 times 8 times h. Remember that commutative property tells me it doesn't matter what order. So I could do it in any order I wanted. I like to do it this way first because it's the order that it gives it to me. But then if I want to rearrange it for later, I can do that. All right, this 2 terms here will pop up their coefficient of. Then 7 and then 9 are the coefficients. And then I'm going to group together my numbers, 7 and 9, and G, and H. Still using that dot in the middle for my multiplication. I'm expanding them back out. And that's going to help us with our next example. Okay, one more example. This is kind of becoming a long lesson here, but there's a lot to it. We kind of want more practice. Okay, let's take a look at this one. I'm going to turn it like this so it's some room, but we don't get lost in our next one. Find the product of 4f times 7g. Okay, we want to expand it out first, just like we did on example 2. And then we're going to simplify it to make it the easiest way possible. Okay, so let's expand 4f times 7g. So we're going to have our coefficient 4, expanded it out, times f, times our coefficient 7, times g. Okay, now let's look back at example 1. When we had 2 numbers, we combined them together to find 12, and then we put the variable on. Okay, we did the same thing here. Okay, so we've just taken it from, let's see, from here, and we put it to this, and now we're going to take it to this. Okay, so remember, our multiplication commutative property tells us that we can put them in any order we want. So let's combine the number values that we know, which would be 4 and 7. That makes 28. So I'm just gonna actually just rewrite it first, and then I'm gonna put the variables last because they always come last when we write our multiplication problems, and our coefficients go in front. Okay, 4 times 7 is 28. And then we're going to put f and g together. E, F, G. Okay, so f comes first, and then g. So the product of 4f times 7g is 28fg. We're still multiplying. We're taking the 4 times 7, which makes 28, times f times g. We're multiplying them all together, just like here, but it's the simplified form. Ooh, a little bit trickier there. Okay. Let's try this one. This one has quite a lot of information in each term. Okay, the coefficient first is 3 in this term of 3DE, and the coefficient 9 in the term 9YZ. Okay, let's expand it first. So we're going to have 3 times D times E times 9 times Y times Z. Oh boy. Okay, again, our commutative property of multiplication means we can put them in any order. So let's put our numbers together, 3 and 9. 3 times 9 is 27, so we're going to have 27. And now we're going to put all of our variables together. All those variables can go squished all next to each other, but they have to be in alphabetical order, remember. So let's do D, E, Y, Z. Oh boy, that's complicated, isn't it? All right, let's take a look at one more example. I'm going to squish that up here so I have some more room. Okay, double the product. Double means times 2, so I'm going to put times 2 here. Double the product. Remember, product is a multiplication. So I'm going to double the product of this. So I got to find the product of this first. Then I'm going to double it, and double it means multiply times 2. Okay, I'm going to expand this out first and get down to this part. Once I get here, then we'll double it. Okay, so I have 6 times y times 3 times b times c. Okay, I'm going to put this in parentheses because we want to get this first, and then we're going to multiply times 2. Okay, now I want to take you back real quick, just so that you don't get confused if they show you one like this. Remember, we can have parentheses beside each other. That means to multiply. So in this case, if I put the 2 right next to the parentheses, it means 2 times whatever this product is. Okay, so if you see it either way, it means the same thing. Okay, I'm expanding it out though, so this is my expanded out. Okay, so I'm going to take 2, I'm going to now condense it without my number there, my multiplication symbol. Put together my numbers. 3 times 6 is 18. And now I can multiply by my variables, but remember, they must be in alphabetical order. I don't want to just list them the way they are because I don't think y comes before b. So this is going to be b, c, y. Now that stays in parentheses because it means I'm going to multiply it times 2. All right, now I'm going to take 18 and 2 because they are like terms. They are both numbers. 18 times 2 is 36. And I'm just going to keep my variables because they can't go with the 2. They aren't numbers. Okay. Whew. Lots of vocabulary. Coefficients and term are new vocabulary words. And lots of information. Make sure that you have notes in your ISN. If you have any questions or you're still confused, you know the drill. Please put them in your ISN so that we can clarify them before we move on to our lesson.